Well, after 12 years of defending conservatism and fighting for conservative values, I've changed my mind. I'm going to go full Hillary. And the reason I did it, of course, is because the most compelling argument of all reached me just earlier today, and I'd like to present it to you now. Just a bit of it, because it only needs just a few seconds.
We really want to give nuclear weapons to a man whose signature move is firing?
Firing things?
But we can end this nightmare before it begins.
We can save the day.
For our children.
For our children.
For our children.
For our communities.
For our communities.
For our communities.
For America.
For America.
For America.
Needless to say, I'm kidding about all that horse crap. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your right angle on the Hollywood do-gooders and the profound effect that they have on the public. Scotty, let's start with you. Every time I see one of these things, every time I see a late-night sketch, every time I see anything like that at all, just, completely going after the Republican nominee, no matter who it is, when I see these celebrities line up to tell me who to vote for, I generally tend to go in the other direction. I think this is one of the greatest campaign ads for Donald Trump ever made.
Yeah, well, I mean, the best thing about this is you've got, like 30 or 40 actors. I don't know how many people were in this thing, but each of them was able to take, anywhere from $150,000 to a $750,000 deduction on their taxes for the charitable pro bono work that they just did here. This is such a sad, disingenuous thing. And just the if you back up a second, let's say you didn't know all these famous people, and just back up a second and say, wait a minute, what we have here is a bunch of people who get paid to pretend that they're somebody they're not. And what they're doing is now trying to tell you, as if they were acting as themselves, who you should vote for. Mm-hmm. And so essentially, these are professional liars who are now advising you with regard to this important decision that you face. The Greek word for actor is actually where we get our word hypocrite. And it's somebody that is like hypocrita or something like that. It comes from the Greek. Anyway, it's really what they are. I mean, these are people who are pretenders. They're phonies. Not to say that some of them probably aren't fine people in their spare time. I do think that for their core market, it reinforces. I don't think that most people look at this and have your reaction and go, well, that just makes me want to vote for Donald Trump all of a sudden, because you didn't want to vote for Donald Trump all of a sudden. You had already determined you were going to do that, and this just makes you double down. And I think that's, like so much of political communication these days, it's really just, there's a joke in the movie Dave where they talk about, they're sitting around at a cabinet meeting and the Secretary of Commerce is trying to defend his budget against cuts by the president, and the president says, now let me understand this, Bob. What you're saying is we're spending $7 million to reinforce an American's previous decision about a car that he already owns? And the Secretary of Commerce goes, yes, sir. And then he just kind of looks at him and goes, Bob. And I think that's what's happening with most political communication now. The only people it benefits are the consultants and the mailing houses and the people who make TV ads and the media outlets that carry these advertisements and YouTube and whoever else that drives eyeballs to it. But in reality, all we're doing is spending a great deal of money to hunker down where we already were.
That's definitely one take on it. There's another paradox here, too. I thought I might talk to you about, Steve, because you're more familiar with his work, I think. This whole Save the Day organization, Save the Day from Donald Trump and the Republicans, of course, was started by Joss Whedon. And Joss is an amazing writer, and he's a very, very talented director as well. But the interesting thing that we talked about yesterday on our conference call is when he's alone with his typewriter or his word processor, whatever the case may be, the characters he writes, the dialogue he writes, the structures that he writes, the stories that he tells are very conservative stories. Yeah. And astonishingly conservative in some cases. And then he comes out with this. Why do you think there's that giant sort of contradiction in terms?
Oh boy, you go back, rewatch Serenity and Captain Malcolm Reynolds' I aim to misbehave speech. One of just the best things ever. It's impossible almost impossible in my mind to reconcile the words that Joss Whedon wrote that come out of Mal's mouth and the words that Joss Whedon writes that come out of his own mouth. But I have a theory. Maybe it's no good. I don't know. Look, when you join the country club and you're playing golf, you talk about money with all the other guys there. Even if you inherited all your money and somebody else manages for you and you just don't care, you go out on the golf course and you talk about money because that's what you do. I learned in my summers working at Southwest Steel Supply as a teenager that when you become a Teamster, you start to smoke, and you smoke Newports. I learned this when I'd run out of my Camel filters, and I'm going around asking everybody if they've got a smoke, and every last Teamster to a man would tap out half a Newport and say, "Menthol okay?" Oh, no. And when you move to Washington, D.C., whether it's for elective office or whether you're a bureaucrat or an appointee or even just a congressional intern, you go to Washington, D.C., and you talk about just how awful and stupid and inbred that the rest of the country is. These are these things that we do when we join a larger group, when we join a collective. We want to fit in. And in my heart, I hope that's the case for Joss Whedon. I hope that guy is still in there somewhere, and that someday he has the courage to break out of that mold that he's put himself in.
And Bill, can I throw something else in here? Because I want to make sure that I didn't leave the impression that I think that there is no value to doing messaging like this, because I think the reason why I'm so dismissive of this actor thing is because they're clearly just preaching to the choir, and they're saying something that everybody who loves them as a person respects and believes in. Where it would be really effective is if these people would get away from this, the white screen background and the clearly Hollywood lit thing, and if you would sit down and talk to some of these people and say, "Tell me how the philosophy of the Democratic Party has made your life better and has made life better for people you know."
And you can't answer that question, which is why they don't do it.
But we could do that. And so I think that one of the benefits of doing some of the stuff that we do here is that we're trying to bridge that gap in many ways and say, we're not just preaching to the choir, but we're saying to the people in the choir who are our members, for example, we're saying, there are ways that you can connect with people. There are ways you can tell effective stories. As long as you are genuine and you sincerely believe what you believe and you treat people with love and dignity, you can get this message out, and you can be more effective than Robert Downey Jr. and what's her name? What's the Johansson woman's name?
Scarlett.
Yeah, that woman.
Scarlett Johansson.
Frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn about your Save the Day. I'd like to make 2 points in closing here. One of them is essentially the point that Steve made, and it's the contradiction between what people in Hollywood say and what they do. If this is not the most conservative line written in the last 50 years on television, I simply don't know what is. I don't know if Joss wrote that episode or that line, but he certainly as executive producer approved it and said this is what we want this character to represent. So you've got this guy who has inside him, when you write, you go into kind of a trance, and the things that are inside you simply come out. 2 hours later, it's done. You look at it going, maybe that's not too bad. So clearly, somebody like Joss Whedon has some fundamental, genuine attachment to conservative values. By the way, Hollywood is all conservative values because, as I like to say, when James Bond confronts the supervillain, he doesn't go armed with a harshly worded letter from the United Nations and then drive off in a Prius at a reasonable speed. So they're stuck. Steve is exactly right. It's peer pressure. It's social proof. It's his way of dealing with everybody at every cocktail party that he's ever going to go to or ever has been. And I think Joss Whedon especially is in a tough position because he has written so many conservative things. I think he's doing this just to prove his liberal bona fides. Look at me. I'm pulling for Hillary despite the fact that everything I do helps those knuckle-dragging savages out in flyover country. I think the larger point, though, is this, ladies and gentlemen. I think Donald Trump exists for one reason, really, when you get right down to it. I think the whole Trump phenomena exists because we are tired of being told what to think by elitists in Washington and Hollywood and New York. We're tired of it. We're tired of it. We've had enough. We've had enough of this business of we're not going to name the shooter who went screaming through Allahu Akbar. Had nothing to do with Islam, nothing. We're tired of all of it. We're tired of the president doubling the federal debt and then telling us this is a budget for prosperity. We're sick of it. We've had enough of it. And all of the Trump phenomenon is a rebellion against this. I'm telling you, when I see things like this, I not only become willing to vote for Trump, I want to put up some lawn signs that can then be stolen. We're a nation of people who are supposed to be individuals, and we should respect our right to debate, but this isn't debate. This is lecturing from people who, as Scott said, are essentially professional liars and who need to show how serious they are because everybody knows nobody really takes them seriously. It's a terrible phenomenon. We're stuck with it, but I really do think the days of this kind of Hollywood pressure and infantile attempts to affect a vote are rapidly coming to a close because I think they become more counterproductive every day. And that's the right angle on liberal Hollywood do-gooders trying to force those knuckle-dragging, conservative, racist, homophobe, sexist bastards out there in flyover country to vote for the witch. I don't think it's going to work anymore. For Steve Green, Scott Ott, and the rest of the spectacular Right Angle team, I'm Bill Whittle. Thank you especially for the members who make these programs possible. If you'd like to be a part of it, just go to BillWhittle.com, and we'd love to have you be part of the common sense resistance against this kind of nonsense.